Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into a story that's equal parts Hollywood tragedy and cautionary tale. The rise and fall of Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, a name that's synonymous with early silent film comedy, but also one of the most notorious scandals of the early 20th century.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating about Arbuckle's story is that it's not just about a scandal, it's about perception. How one event can completely overshadow a lifetime of achievement, and also how the media can shape public opinion sometimes at the expense of the truth.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're going to be looking at not just what happened, but how the narrative was constructed and the devastating impact it had on Arbuckle's life.
Right, and I think a lot of people might be surprised just how much Arbuckle contributed to the world of comedy before any of this went down. I mean, he wasn't just a funny man on screen, he was a mentor, a pioneer, a true innovator of physical comedy.
Yeah, like everybody knows Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, right? But not a lot of people know that Arbuckle was really instrumental in their early careers. He wasn't just a colleague, he was a mentor, guiding them and influencing their comedic styles.
Exactly. I mean, think about all that slapstick and trademark agility in those early silent films. A lot of that can be traced back to Arbuckle. He had this incredible ability to move his large frame with such grace and precision. Like he could do backflips, somersaults, all sorts of acrobatics that you wouldn't think someone his size could do.
I've seen some of those clips and it's mind-blowing. I mean, imagine a guy his size doing backflips. The audience must have gone wild for that. But so how does a kid who, like the sources say, was rejected by his own father for his size become this beloved comedic icon?
Yeah.
Where does it all begin for Roscoe?
Well, his story is kind of a classic rags to riches tale, but with a lot of heartbreak along the way. You know, his father's rejection really had an impact on him, and then losing his mother at such a young age, just added another layer of difficulty. It's almost like those early struggles fueled his determination to succeed.
So he starts out in vaudeville, right? Honing his craft on stage. And he quickly becomes a crowd favorite. And this is like before film, before Hollywood even exists as we know it.
Yeah, and this is where that natural comedic talent just shines through. It wasn't just about his size. It was about his timing, his expressions, his ability to connect with the audience. He just had this innate ability to make people laugh.
And then comes Hollywood and his big break with Max Sennett's Keystone Studios. I mean, that's like joining the biggest comedy troupe of the time, right?
Yay!
He's working alongside Newell Norman, Charlie Chaplin. It's the who's who of silent film comedy.
Oh, yeah. And he quickly rises to the top. I mean, we're talking million-dollar contracts. Unheard of at the time, his success was truly meteoric.
Yet, amidst all this success, there's this piece of his past that he just can't seem to shake. The nickname Fatty. And sources say that he absolutely despised it, finding it demeaning and a constant reminder of his father's rejection.
It's almost ironic, isn't it? This larger-than-life figure, literally and figuratively, who brings so much joy to audiences. But he's haunted by this label.
I mean, this internal conflict, this struggle with his public persona is such a crucial part of his story. And it really sets the stage for the events that unfold on that fateful Labor Day weekend in 1921 when Arbuckle decides to take a trip to San Francisco.
A seemingly innocent trip with friends, meant for relaxation and a bit of fun. Little did he know that this trip would become a turning point in his life, leading to accusations that would forever tarnish his image.
So he checks into the St. Francis Hotel, specifically a suite of rooms, and decides to have a little gathering. Nothing fancy, just some friends getting together.
Yeah.
And this is where we start to see how easily a narrative can be manipulated.
Because what starts as this impromptu gathering turns into this media-fueled frenzy with accusations flying from all directions. And at the center of it all is Virginia Rappe, an aspiring actress who becomes ill at the party and later dies.
Yeah. Her death is a tragedy, no doubt.
Yeah.
But it's the events leading up to her illness and the subsequent accusations that really take center stage and become the focal point of this whole scandal.
And this is where Maud Delmont enters the picture. A woman with a reputation for, shall we say, bending the truth to her advantage. She becomes the key witness, the one who points the finger at Arbuckle, claiming that he assaulted Rappe.
And her claims ignite a firestorm of media attention. Headlines explode, painting Arbuckle as this depraved monster.
Yeah.
The classic case of sensationalism over due process.
Right. And remember, this is the early 1920s, the height of yellow journalism. Newspapers were hungry for scandals, especially those involving Hollywood stars. And they didn't hesitate to print salacious details, whether they were true or not.
And public opinion, already swayed by Delmont's claims, and the media frenzy quickly turns against Arbuckle. The man who was once adored becomes a pariah. It's a stark reminder of how quickly fame can turn into infamy. But before we get into the accusations and trials, which we'll dive into next, I want to pause here and ask, what are your initial reactions to what you've heard so far? What stands out to you about this beginning?
Well, one thing that's really important to remember is that even before that party, Virginia Rappe's health was already a point of concern. The sources kind of paint this picture of someone who was struggling with certain health issues, specifically cystitis, and there are even suggestions that she may have recently undergone an abortion. So, this coupled with what seems to have been a low tolerance for alcohol, adds another layer of complexity to the situation.
It's like a puzzle with missing pieces, isn't it? You have these pre-existing health conditions, and then you throw alcohol into the mix, and things, can become pretty unpredictable. But so how does all of this connect to the accusations against Arbuckle?
Right. Well, it raises questions about the cause of Rappe's illness and subsequent death. You see, while the initial narrative focused on assault, the medical evidence is actually surprisingly ambiguous. A lot of the sources that I've looked at indicate that doctors initially diagnosed Rappe with indigestion, not internal injuries, which would typically be associated with an assault.
Wait, hold on. So if the initial diagnosis was indigestion, why was she transferred to a maternity hospital? That seems a bit odd, right?
Yeah, that's where things get even murkier. The transfer to a maternity hospital, coupled with the later removal of her reproductive organs during an unofficial autopsy, definitely raises eyebrows. It kind of suggests an attempt to conceal something, possibly the illegal abortion itself.
Wow. So many layers to this story.
Yeah.
So while there's this cloud of suspicion and speculation around what actually happened to Rappe Arbuckle's facing mounting pressure from the public and the authorities, right?
Oh, absolutely. Despite the lack of concrete evidence directly linking him to Rappe's death, the police, fueled by Delmont's claims and a desire to appease public outcry, they charge Arbuckle with manslaughter. And what's really striking here is that Captain Duncan Matheson, the lead investigator, made a very public statement early on, essentially declaring Arbuckle guilty before a thorough investigation had even taken place.
I mean, that's a pretty bold move for an investigator, don't you think? It seems like they'd already made up their minds before all the facts were in.
It certainly appears that way. And this is where we see those dynamics of power at play. Arbuckle, despite his fame and wealth, was essentially up against a system that was very quick to believe the worst about him, especially given the social climate of the time.
So he's arrested, he's charged with manslaughter. What happens next? Does the case go to trial?
Yes. The first trial begins in November of 1921. And the courtroom becomes a stage, really a spectacle for the media and the public alike. Newspapers are churning out stories, every detail is scrutinized, dissected. I mean, it's a complete media circus with Arbuckle trapped at the center.
I can only imagine that pressure, right? The anxiety of facing a trial while your life is being dissected in the press. How does Arbuckle handle all of this?
Well, throughout the trial, Arbuckle maintains his composure. He takes the stand, he denies the allegations, and presents his version of events, claiming that he found Rappe ill in his bathroom and tried to help her. But his word is pitted against Maud Delmont's, whose testimony continues to paint him as the aggressor.
It's a classic he said, she said situation, right? But in this case, the stakes are incredibly high.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Delmont's own credibility comes into question. The sources highlight a pattern of deceit, extortion, and a history of manipulating situations for personal gain. Yet despite these red flags, her testimony carries a lot of weight in the public eye.
Why do you think that is? Why would the jury potentially believe her over Arbuckle, especially with her questionable past?
What's a complex interplay of factors, right? You have the sensational nature of the case, the public's appetite for Hollywood scandals, and perhaps, unfortunately, a willingness to believe the worst about someone who was seen as larger than life.
So the trial becomes less about seeking truth and more about public spectacle fueled by sensationalism.
There's definitely an element of that, yeah. The courtroom was packed with spectators. Reporters hung on every word. The case dominated headlines across the country. It was a media-feeding frenzy, and Arbuckle was the main course.
So after all the drama and conflicting accounts, what's the verdict? Is Arbuckle found guilty?
Yes. Well, after much deliberation, the jury reaches a deadlock, with the majority actually leaning towards acquittal. A mistrial is declared, and a second trial is scheduled for January 1922.
Wow. A mistrial. I mean, it must have felt like such a roller coaster for Arbuckle, right? A sliver of hope, followed by the realization that he had to endure this whole ordeal again. So how did that second trial unfold?
Well, the second trial, if you can believe it, is even more dramatic. You have conflicting testimonies, whispers of witness tampering, and a surprising revelation from one of the party guests, Zay Prevost, who claims that she was pressured to testify against Arbuckle.
Pressured by whom? Was it ever revealed who was behind this?
Unfortunately, the sources that I've reviewed don't explicitly state who was putting the pressure on Prevost, but it definitely raises serious questions about the integrity of the investigation and the motivations of those involved.
I mean, this whole situation just keeps getting more and more tangled. So does the second trial result in a verdict?
No. After weeks of intense proceedings, the jury is once again deadlocked. But this time they're leaning towards a guilty verdict, a major setback for Arbuckle and his defense team. And the pressure mounts as they prepare for a third and final trial.
A third trial. The tension must have been palpable. What's the strategy for this final attempt to clear Arbuckle's name?
Well, this time Arbuckle's team leaves no stone unturned. They present new evidence, they bring forward additional witnesses to support his innocence, and they really focus heavily on Rappe's pre-existing health conditions. They emphasize the lack of concrete evidence directly linking Arbuckle to any assault.
It's a battle of narratives. A fight for the truth amidst a sea of speculation and media-driven frenzy. What's the outcome? Does Arbuckle finally get his chance at justice? Well, after 2 grueling trials and months of living under this cloud of suspicion, it all comes down to this, the third and final trial. So what happens?
Well, this time the jury takes only 6 minutes to reach a verdict. They find Roscoe Arbuckle not guilty.
6 minutes. Wow. It's almost hard to grasp that after all the, complexities and drama of those previous trials, the final verdict arrives so swiftly.
It is quite a contrast, isn't it? And I think the jury's swift decision really speaks volumes about the strength of Arbuckle's defense this time around. They really effectively dismantled the prosecution's case, which relied so heavily on speculation and their often contradictory testimony of Maud Delmont.
Yeah, it makes you think about those previous deadlocked juries and that agonizing wait for a resolution. I mean, was justice truly served in this third trial, or did Arbuckle simply benefit from a more, robust legal strategy?
That's a good question, and it's definitely one worth pondering. But what's undeniable is that the damage to Arbuckle's reputation had already been done. Despite being cleared of all charges, his career never fully recovered.
So even with the weight of those accusations lifted, he still carries the burden of the scandal. How does he navigate life after such a public and deeply personal ordeal?
Well, Arbuckle attempts to rebuild his life, but it's a long and arduous journey. He travels the world seeking a fresh start and a reprieve from that constant scrutiny. He remarries. Not once, but twice, although neither marriage lasts. And he even tries his hand at directing under an assumed name, working kind of behind the scenes to keep that passion for filmmaking alive.
It's a testament to his resilience that he kept pushing forward,
Yeah.
trying to find his place in a world that had really turned against him. Makes you wonder what kind of films he made under that alias. Could you see, his signature comedic style, the influence of his vaudeville days, even when he couldn't use his own name?
Yeah, there's a certain bittersweet irony in that, isn't there? This comedic genius, forced to operate in the shadows, unable to fully reclaim that spotlight that was once his. It speaks to the, enduring power of scandal and the difficulty of escaping the shadow of accusations, even when proven innocent.
And then in 1933, a glimmer of hope emerges. Warner Brothers offers him a contract to direct a series of short comedies. It's a chance for him to step back into the world that he loved, albeit in a more limited capacity.
Oh, he's ecstatic about the opportunity, eager to prove himself once again. He tells reporters that he's dedicated to creating clean, wholesome pictures, emphasizing a return to that, family-friendly comedy that had initially made him famous.
It feels like a moment of redemption, right? A chance for a well-deserved comeback. But sadly, fate had other plans.
Tragically, just as things are looking up, Arbuckle suffers a fatal heart attack at the young age of 46. It's a heartbreaking end to a life marked by both extraordinary success and, profound adversity.
It leaves you with such a sense of what could have been. All the laughter he might have brought into the world, the films he could have made, the legacy he could have solidified. It's a stark reminder of how fragile life is and how quickly circumstances can change.
Roscoe Arbuckle's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, the fragility of reputation, and the importance of discerning truth amidst, the chaos of sensationalized narratives. It's a story that really resonates deeply, even a century later, as we navigate our own complex world of instant news and viral trends.
Yeah, it raises so many important questions about the role of the media, the responsibility we all have to think critically, and the importance of due process. Arbuckle's case serves as a stark reminder that public opinion can be a fickle and unforgiving force, capable of both elevating and destroying individuals.
It leaves us with a final thought-provoking question. In today's digital age, with the constant barrage of information and the rapid spread of news, how might the Arbuckle scandal have unfolded differently? Would social media have amplified the misinformation, or would it have served as a platform for uncovering the truth?
It's certainly something to consider as we navigate our own media landscape where narratives are shaped and reshaped at lightning speed. We need to be vigilant, question what we read and hear, and remember that there's always more to the story than what meets the eye. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the complex life and legacy of Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle. We hope you'll continue to explore this fascinating and often misunderstood chapter of Hollywood history.